Thank you for joining me on Commanding Cyber. This is our first episode of Commanding Cyber, and I wanted to introduce it with the reasons I thought it was an important topic for conversation in cybersecurity. So the intention of this discussion every time we hold it is about creating a bridge between the technical challenges of cybersecurity and the leadership questions that are so important. I feel very strongly that a cyber attack is an attack on an organization, not on a department, that it is human beings trying to interfere with our right to run our lives, operate our businesses, and govern our society. And for that reason, it's important to leaders, both in technology and in the C-suite, who are allocating budget and resources. There are any number of important ways to think about cyber, and I intend to make these relevant for both technical practitioners and non-technical business leaders alike. And today we start with a terrific opportunity to dive in deep with my guest, Otuoze Baiye, who you will find has an extraordinary background. And so, Otuoze, thank you for joining us, and welcome to Commanding Cyber.
Hey, Scott. Thank you so much for inviting me to the first episode of Commanding Cyber. I really appreciate this connection. And I'd also like to give a shout out to the Cyber Breakfast Club, because that is what originally brought us together. Having participated in one of the events there and learning about Ridgeback, and we've continued the conversation from there. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, listen, you're welcome, but I think that the reason this is an interesting conversation for me is that if this is a discussion for leaders, you're a highly qualified, highly trained leader, having gone to West Point, having had a command assignment, and ending up in quite technical area in cybersecurity. So for that reason, I think you're a terrific contributor for us. And I really am interested in how you ended up at West Point, because I don't think there's any better leadership education that results in very young people having a lot of responsibility at a young age. So I'm
Yeah,
curious about that.
thank you. Thank you so much. Like you said, I am a West Point grad, class of 2019. Still Army, beat Navy. Um, Quite simply, my journey to West Point, I was just trying to get money for school. That's really it. But the way that I got there was, I found out about Army ROTC after I graduated high school, got accepted into a program, and then a family friend told me to get into West Point, or told me to apply to West Point because they felt that I had the leadership qualities to be a West Point trained officer. I knew nothing about it, but I just, just a 17-year-old kid, but I decided to apply. And like I said, I ended up graduating in 2019. I commissioned as a missile defense officer in the Army. So I worked on what was at the time the Army's latest missile defense system, which is called the Integrated Air and Missile Defense Battle Command System. It's a mouthful. We call it IBCS for short. So I ended up being an IBCS platoon leader, right? And I led a team of 50 people in total on this $100 million defense missile system, right? And if you know anything about the Army, you know that you have multiple jobs. So being a platoon leader on a missile system, it meant being a technical program manager, right? It also meant managing logistics, right? And then it also meant managing the functional audit function. So an example, one of the defense contractors, there were many of them that created a bunch of different parts on the system. They would tell us, the main computer, it should take 30 seconds to turn on. So I would take a stopwatch, right? And then I would count. As I pressed the on button on the system, I would take a stopwatch and then count. And if it took 30 seconds, great. If it took 45 seconds. I'd write it down, annotate, send it to the contractors, and they'd go back and refit, bring it back to us, and it would fit the capabilities that we were looking for. So all of those roles, right? Being on a missile defense system, running some scenarios. We see what's going on right now over in the Gulf Coast, right? With America and Iran, all of that stuff that's happening. I never did any combat deployments, but I train for those scenarios every day. We'd go out in the middle of the desert and train for that. So that's where my technology career really started, was having to have a bunch of operational roles on this missile system. Not only was I responsible for the health and welfare for 50 soldiers, but I was also responsible for making, accounts for people on the system, right? Telling them to manage their passwords, things that a lot of people wouldn't really get to do until later on in their careers, but they gave those responsibilities to me as a 22, 23-year-old kid.
Well, and I understand enough about the U.S. military that the officer class is trained in leadership rather than technical skill, and that's an important qualifier. But it also means you understand conflict. You understand the idea of warfare. And to my mind, and I want to just chat about this before we get into where you've ended up, which was a very technical role, about how cyber should be interpreted as a contest of wills between adversaries, someone who is operating a business, running a bank or a hospital, and someone else out there who seeks to gain some form of advantage by using the internet and technology to assert control over them. So, I mean, do you share my view that cyber is a contest and an important one?
Yeah, I 100% do. And we'll get into this a little bit more, but that's the work that I do at Black Knight Risk Management, right? I help we help regulated institutions and government agencies manage their digital risk and govern their technologies. And I genuinely believe that the America should understand the national security implications of cybersecurity incidents and cybersecurity events, right? Because the same tactics that are used by adversaries who want to attack America's critical defense systems, they're also being used to attack our banking infrastructure, right? Our energy systems. These are the same issues that we're seeing all over, right? The same third-party actors, the advanced persistent threats that attack America's military, they're the same groups of people that are infiltrating our businesses, right? You hear stories about state actors, right, coming into companies pretending to be employees, right? American employees of these companies, but they're just siphoning information right back to their governments, right? These are all the same issue that we're facing, just in different contexts.
And I actually feel that because the internet is everywhere and every organization's employees and systems touch the internet, that there is a weakest link challenge, which is to say that as a part of the economy, any company in the United States is a part of the system by which we create value, and therefore everyone is a contributor in their own way to securing the environment in which that happens. So you may think it's a national security challenge. It is a very, very acute national security challenge. But just because you run a business in a city that does something unrelated to national security doesn't mean you aren't part of the attack surface, to use that expression, in general. And so I think people are well served to be concerned for their own businesses, but also for, as you said, the broader picture. So I think that what is interesting about your trajectory also, Otuoze, is you ended up working in the banking system doing compliance examination. So I just want to understand a little bit about how that transition and what that work involved, so we can get into that and the issues.
Yeah. So as you stated, I ended up getting into banking compliance. So I left the military 4 years ago this month, actually, August of 2022.
Thank you for your service. I forgot to say that.
No worries. Thank you. I know you appreciate it. So I got out of the military 4 years ago, moved to the New York area, and then I completed a master's degree in cybersecurity in 1 year at the New York Institute of Technology. So go Cybears. That's our motto there, or our mascot. But when I graduated, I got a job first at New York State, right, and then I moved up to the OCC. So I spent 2 years in total in bank regulation, and I was a cybersecurity bank examiner, right? And I think that title, cybersecurity bank examiner, it's kind of limiting because I didn't just cover cybersecurity. I also covered operational risk, right? I would look at access controls, IT audits, right? Risk assessments. So my job was to go to banks and other financial institutions, credit unions, crypto companies, and all sorts of fintechs. I would go to them, organizations from under $1 billion to over $1 trillion, right? And especially at the smaller institutions, I would walk in and I would talk to their C-suite directly. I would say, if we were going to cover their IT audit program over the last year, for instance, or their technology project management program, I would ask them, okay, show me some of the artifacts that you have covering this aspect of your bank's operation. So let's start with your policies and procedures, right? Then I would interview them and I would ask for artifacts demonstrating their compliance, right? Mm-hmm. And then I would give them grades. So the role is technical in nature, right? I couldn't have succeeded. I couldn't have done well as a bank examiner without having the technical background in missile defense and also being a master's degree holder in cybersecurity, right? But my job was to talk to leaders, figure out what are your processes at your banks and your fintechs.
But I think it's interesting because compliance obviously is a mandate of the business operating in a regulated industry. Some industries are relatively more regulated than others. What did you feel like the attitudes of leaders were towards compliance? Were they warm and friendly to it? Were they resentful of it? I'm curious because it's kind of an important question because you have to do it. You can't not do it.
Without getting myself in trouble here, I generally found that your traditional banks, so your established banks, companies that have been around 100, 150 plus years, they were a lot more receptive to following these cybersecurity compliance mandates because they are mandates from the government, right? New York State, I worked at New York State. They have a law called Part 500. It's their cybersecurity law, and there's 21 sections, right? And banks have to follow that, right? At the federal level, there's not one overall cybersecurity law, but it's just a conglomeration of different mandates, right? But when I would go to banks and see, okay, they generally have programs and even organizations that weren't doing well, I saw that they wanted to do better because, if you're the leader at a 150-year-old bank, you don't want the bank to shutter down under your watch because that looks really bad on your resume, right? But in terms of organizations that I personally feel were less receptive, I would honestly say it was those fintech companies, right?
I see.
The cryptos, right? The crypto companies, these new sort of pseudo banking fintech companies, because their idea is more so about moving fast and breaking things and then worry about regulation later. So that was a balance that I always had to watch, right? Because when I would go into the fintechs and the crypto companies, I would have to let them know, hey, you are regulated by New York State or you're regulated by the federal government. You have to follow this. It doesn't matter how small you are. It doesn't matter that you're a startup and that your board is growing and it's nascent. By the fact that you're regulated, you're listed as a regulated entity on day one, this is what you have to do. And we would get into those conversations, and it was always respectful, but it wasn't always a happy conversation. I can put it that way.
Well, I can understand, because a lot of people are resentful of having to, being told what to do. But that brings us to the sort of the role of compliance. And I know you have well-formed and well-developed views about how compliance operates. So, to my mind, and I'm far less close to the matter than are you, but I think that compliance. Let's talk about this. Compliance is a way to assure that processes are in place, often without confirming the effect of the processes that are required. I want to talk about that, if you agree or disagree or have a point of view.
I think I would agree with you. And one thing that I would add, I would say that compliance shows that processes are in place and that there's accountability. But of course, compliance alone will not protect you from a cyber attack, right? Everything else has to be working, right? But I can guarantee, if you're an organization that doesn't have a well put together compliance structure, if you're breached in a cyber incident, it's going to hit you a lot harder than an organization that does have suitable compliance regimes in place. That's from my perspective, and from things that I've seen in bank regulation, and today as an advisor to regulated institutions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, if there is sort of a gap in process versus effect, how do you see the role of AI as a helper, but then also as a threat when in the hands of someone pointing it at a regulated institution as a cyber weapon?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I view AI as a force multiplier, and that's both a good thing and a bad thing. On the institutional side, right, we can have AI helping us to make our processes more efficient. You can implement, sticking with the financial services sector, for instance, we can implement chatbots, right, to where now the bank can connect with its customers a lot faster, right? Maybe lower level issues, low priority tickets, so to speak, they could be handled by bots, AI, if you will, that have the contextual understanding, right? And then that could free up space so that human interaction is saved for more complex use cases, right? Mm-hmm. That's ultimately a force multiplier for an organization. But AI, right, it's being democratized, right? That means everybody's having access to it, including adversaries, right? Including amateur adversaries, right? Kids that are just bored. Hey, you know what? I'm going to go online and do X, Y, Z. Oh, whoops! I just shut down this random bank server, and I was able to do it because of AI, right? Or more sophisticated attacks. So I think where organizations are struggling now is, how do we implement AI in our processes and make our business more efficient without opening us up to a wider attack surface that adversaries can exploit, right? Yeah. Even adversaries who have limited skills, they could just use AI as a force multiplier on attacks on our systems. That's what I think about, right? As an advisor to financial institutions now.
So I agree with you. It's obviously a capability that can be very instrumental in a cyber defense context. But I also have a close understanding out of avocation and training in military history. I'm a history major,
Yeah,
and
so am I.
yeah,
Westwood. Yep.
yeah. One of the things that I think often is lost in cyber is that it's deemed to be a highly technical subject area, and therefore people who don't feel technical don't feel capable of getting their arms around it. But
Yeah.
I believe that war has been waged and conflicts have been won through the evolution of techniques that change the relationship between attacker and defender. And we can go back to the longbow and gunpowder. We can go back to the helicopter or blitzkrieg. More recently in conflict, we have drones that are very cheap, that can attack in mass, autonomously even, and even more frightening are hypersonic missiles that you would know better, take no time at all, traveling at 5 or 6 times the speed of sound to reach their target. And the relevance to me of those analogies is that they have taken a capability to change the properties themselves, the physical properties of attack. A submarine went underwater, that created stealth. But a hypersonic missile goes so fast. I think that AI as an attack capability is combining the physical properties of a hypersonic missile, a drone that is cheap and masked, a helicopter that changes the physical, the geography, if you will, of the battlescape, and therefore, I don't think it's out of reach to understand AI and the implications for defense. And this is where I think the AI is, as a component of the adversaries' arsenal, is a challenge for compliance. I'll just make a short case and then we can talk about it.
Yeah.
Compliance is clearly oriented towards maintaining a level of standard across an industry that essentially isn't designed to be a minimum standard, but it really is. It says everybody who participates in this industry needs to be mindful of meeting these process standards and creating an environment that is protected as well as we can assure its protection. But I do think compliance, therefore, is a little bit backward looking. So it's looking at techniques, processes, procedures that have been in place and enshrining them in a standard that must then be observed by the industry participants. Because those standards didn't contemplate the physical properties of attack when AI enabled, I'm concerned about the applicability of a lot of compliance. I wonder how you think about it.
Yeah. I think that's a really excellent point. Something that I think an example that I think would agree with what you're talking about is, hey, let's look at, we'll take the state of New York, because I used to work at New York State Department of Financial Service. So we know that ChatGPT really became widely known and used the end of 2022, the beginning of 2023. It wasn't until October of 2024 that the Department of Financial Services put out guidance, so not law, but guidance of how financial services firms can securely implement AI in their firms, right? And I know that because I was on the team that did some research for that, right? And then, okay, fast forward a little bit more. In December of 2025, New York State passed the RAISE Act, the Responsible AI Safety and Education Act. And so what that law does is it mandates our frontier models. So OpenAI, Anthropic, all of those frontier models, it mandates that they perform due diligence steps, right, throughout the life cycle of their AI systems. And it wants to ensure that as these products are being shipped out to different industries, they are being done so in a way that meets New York State DFS compliance standards, right? So what's the issue with that? ChatGPT came out the end of 2022 or beginning 2023. Guidance, so not law, came out 18 months later, right? And then 3 years later, we passed a law that's not even going to go into effect until January of 2027. So the speed of regulation for AI, it hasn't been able to catch up to the way AI has been being output, right? In the last 4 years, how many versions of ChatGPT have come out? How many updates have we had,
Yeah.
right? So the law just can't catch up to
No.
innovation. However, what I always argue with people, the argument I always make is we still have standard frameworks that we could use, right? We have ISO, right? The ISO 27001 Information Systems Management Framework, right? We have ISO 42001, the AI Systems Management Framework. We have organizations that have existed, right? And their frameworks have always been about processes, right? Not individual technologies. So I've always made the case that AI is just another tool, right? And organizations should be focused less on specific laws that are coming out, because the laws are never going to be able to match up to reality. But they should focus on the existing frameworks, because I still think they're strong, right? An organization should, at a minimum, be doing a yearly risk assessment, right? And reporting that to the board. If you're a regulated institution, you should always be doing that, right? If you're going to implement an AI system, right, there's project management principles that you should always be following for any new sort of technology that you're going to implement in your organization, right? So I always make that case that don't think of AI as something that there are specific rules to govern to, right? But think of it as an emerging technology that we could just add to our existing processes, right? If you're following all of your processes, right? Back in the day when moving from on-prem to the cloud, when that was, the big deal, AI governance frameworks came out. Governance frameworks came out to match it, right? And those frameworks, they largely haven't changed in the last 10 years, because they still match with what's going on today, I would argue.
Yeah. Well, I think the word that I think is an important word that you used a few times is principles. I think of accounting and getting a GAAP audit as meeting specific standards, but the standards flow from 5-6 principles: conservatism, matching, and so forth. I think it's inherently harder in compliance to create a limited set of principles because of the evolutionary or even revolutionary nature of innovation in technology. And therefore, you're always having to adapt, which is challenging for any bureaucracy that applies to hundreds, thousands, or tens of thousands of organizations. But let me ask you a question. So the idea of strategy is important to me. And if you had to select a strategy that flowed, a defense strategy in particular, that flowed from the assemblage of compliance measures for a bank, what would that strategy be?
Everything always has to be matched to the business use case. So before you get into, I always see this with organizations that I advise. They say, hey, well, we want to implement AI and we think ChatGPT is going to really work for us, or we think XYZ tool is going to work for us. And I say, why? And then they go, well, it's because I see other people using it. And then I ask them, well, what is it that you do in your business specifically? And then they'll say, well, I do XYZ thing. And I said, well, do you think this actually works for you, GPT or this specific tool? So I think when it comes to both compliance and technology implementation, organizations really just need to take a step back. I know that we're in an AI gold rush, and no one wants to get left behind, and the board will have these mandates of, hey, we need to be getting AI too. But I think leadership needs to take a step back and say, okay, it's fine to want to implement this, but what are our business processes, right? You have to look at what is it that you do as a business, who are the people that you serve, and who are the stakeholders that you are accountable to. And you work backwards from there. You can't start with, I definitely want to use this specific tool and then build everything else around it. Because by the time you get to the tool adoption, you might realize that it doesn't actually work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you implement it and then you get vendor lock-in after you realize that your business use case has changed, but you can't switch, right? Or the business itself, the vendor that you're using for your AI tool, it changes, right? And then it no longer matches with your business use case, but you don't know how to adapt, really. I think organizations, they should be getting together. So all of the leadership team, and it's a comprehensive effort, right? The board can't just tell the IT director, hey, implement AI in all of our systems. Everybody needs to get together, all the stakeholders, IT, the cyber department, finance, HR, right? Legal, communications, everybody needs to get together, right? And then they need to say, they need to go through it process by process. Take one business use case at a time and then say, hey, as a team, let's determine what is it that matters to us, who are our stakeholders, and then from there you could say, does it make sense to implement this sort of technology? And then as we're implementing this technology, you start going, hey, well, what are some frameworks generally that govern how we implement this technology, right? You have to start from the bottom.
Okay. So I want to get to Black Knight now.
Yeah.
And so first of all, having been a West Point graduate, run missile defense program for the U.S. Army, and been immersed in compliance, tell about Black Knight and what you're doing now.
Yeah. So the name Black Knight, first of all, that goes back to West Point, because Black Knight, that's the mascot of West Point. And I gave it that name because when people know what Black Knight is, they understand. But if they don't know, they ask. I tell them that it's the standard that I wanted to set for myself. Right at West Point, they teach us about discipline and duty and care. Right, and I wanted Black Knight Risk Management to have that stance. Right, this will be our standard of excellence. Right, is the Black Knight standard. Right. And so what I do at Black Knight Risk Management is I help regulated entities and government agencies with managing their digital risk, right, and governing their technology so that they could move their mission forward, right? We want to enable technology, right, and not stop people from it, not not tell them, hey, you can't do this, because we already understand everybody wants to implement AI, right? So if we go and we say, no, it's not safe, I'm never going to get any business, right? But my job is to help people understand what are the questions that, if you're in a regulated environment, what are the questions your regulators are going to be asking you for the fact, right?
So you're adapting the way the world is to the needs that the client has to meet in order to do it safely.
Exactly. Yeah. And we have to, because that's what the clients are doing themselves for their customers. Yeah. So I have to help, advise these institutions on how they could implement these technologies safely, because, bringing it back to that Black Knight standard of excellence, my job is to help people do things the right way, because I believe that regulated institutions, they have a duty to make sure that they're defending their systems from these attacks on our critical systems, right? Bringing it all back to the national security issue.
So now, whether you're calling on someone in a unit, a business unit, or at the head of the organization, a company's priorities, its budget process defines an awful lot about what's important. So this question goes to the really the topic of the show, which is leadership conversations.
Yeah.
I would like to ask, what aspect of decision making do you wish had a different consideration than it currently does? In other words, is there a way that leaders can evolve their own thinking that would be useful to them, acquiring your services? But the reason you're providing your services is so that people operate within guidelines that create safety and security. What do you think the organization should be more thoughtful about than they currently are?
I would go back to the communication aspect of it. This is a team effort. It goes back to what I said a moment ago.
Mm-hmm.
Implementing AI in an organization, that's not just something you could give to the IT department and tell them, have at it, right? Because they don't understand the business requirements. You have to get everybody in the room together, talk about what it is that you're trying to do as a business, and then work on it together. A lot of times I see institutions, they might implement AI, right? They have a successful implementation. Although I would challenge myself on saying that, right? It's not successful because after they implement it, they'll do a survey, right? And then find out 50% of their employees aren't using it. That's a problem of lack of training for their employees, right? So there needs to be a standard of excellence throughout the whole organization, right? The C-suite, they need to be talking to each other. They need to be in line with each other.
Yeah.
Communicating, this is what our business does. These are the use cases that we have. This is how we're trying to move forward with technology, whether it's AI or cloud or whatever topic du jour we have, right? We need to work together as a C-suite, communicate this from the board down to the executive level, down to the line management level, and empower our organization's leaders, right? And empower our staff so that they are equipped to carry out these tasks for the business, right?
Okay. So I actually, there's an example in the evolution of cybersecurity in organizations that I think is sort of maybe a reflection of the constraints on dialogue. So if you go back, 40 years or 35 years, cybersecurity was an antivirus solution to problems that cropped up now and again on your computer. By 20 years ago or 25 years ago, it was a substantial enough threat with enough complexity, because organizations had evolved more complexity in their systems, that we've seen in many companies a bifurcation, a separation between delivering IT capabilities, which is IT, and securing the IT, which is cybersecurity. So one group is providing capability, another group is constraining it to secure it. To take the idea of fluid, effective, and continuous communication, do you have a view on the bifurcation between IT and security in the organization?
Yeah. I often hear from organizations I talk to, they call security or compliance or both, they'll call that the business prevention unit, right? I've heard that being used multiple times. But again, it goes back to it, right? The reason why there's a bifurcation is because there's a lack of understanding of a shared goal. I'll go back to the example of the military. So in the Army, everybody's job is to support the infantry, right? Those are the guys with the rifles on the front lines, right? So from the cooks to HR, to missile defense, all that. It's to enable the infantry to go and close directly with the enemy, right? So everybody knows in all of our training exercises, everything is always to enable the infantry.
Mm-hmm.
So I take that same mindset to business, and I say the goal of everybody, every department, is to drive the business forward. It has to be inculcated in the organization's values, right? So without the business, if there's no business, there's no need for an IT team, right? Mm-hmm. Why would it be there? You can't just have IT for the sake of it, right?
Right.
Why are they fixing servers, right? It's to get people communicating with each other to achieve their business goals. Organizations have to realize that whether they like it or not, you have to bring everybody in.
Yeah.
The CEO can't just say, hey, I want this to happen. The board can't say, I want this to happen, tell that to the CEO, and then push it down to everybody and just, command.
Yeah.
Right. There has to be more buy-in from everybody. It
Right.
has to be like that. And I think that's how business is changing. Right. You used to be able to, going back to what you said, you used to be able to just say, oh yeah, download this antivirus on the computer and then I'm good. That's
Right.
my cyber.
Right.
But now it's my HR director, she just opened up a link, right? And then now there's all of this customer data or internal employee data being leaked everywhere. So how does HR, right? How are we going to talk to HR to make sure that they don't open up, links from wherever? Hey, you won $5,000 today, right?
Yeah.
And that's not going to come from just the IT director or just the cybersecurity director. All these people need to be together. So just going back to it, this is everybody's problem.
Yeah. No, I think that's key. That's key.
Mm-hmm.
Well, okay. So when people watch us here, who do you especially serve in terms of types of organizations? So if someone's watching, they know, oh, I can call Otuoze and he can help me out. What types of businesses are you working with?
Yeah. So if you're a regulated institution, I'm based out of New York, but I operate across the country. So if you're a regulated financial institution, smaller institutions especially, and you're navigating technology and compliance issues, right? Trying to get your team to move forward with technology, and you don't know where to start or how to make your processes strong, then I'm the exact person that you want to talk to. So, your small banks and credit unions, the cryptocurrency companies, especially the institutions that are regulated by New York State, because I had a strong presence there, right? I'm the person that you can reach out to, and all of the things that I've done, from being a technology leader, right, leading a technical program, right, of a missile defense team, to working directly with the C-suite, right? I've done all of that, and my job is to help empower the C-suite. I'm not the business prevention officer, right? If I come into an organization, I'm here to empower you. So if you're an organization that's forward thinking and you want to learn how to get to the next step and grow while keeping your regulators happy, reach out and let's talk.
Okay, great. Okay, well, I have one more. I have a personal favor, Otuoze.
Yeah, go ahead.
So one of my very oldest friends, who I've known since I was a young teenager, his son just went through his acceptance ceremony at West Point this weekend.
Oh yeah, A-Day. They just had that.
And I think classes started yesterday or today. So my question is, to a young man or young woman who's just starting up at West Point, what is really good advice for them to bear in mind that you wish you'd had or benefited from?
Take a lot of pictures. I have lots of pictures from West Point, but I could have had so many more. I used to think I was so cool, man. I can't wait to get out of here. I'm not doing this military crap, but I wish I had done that. And also make friends with people. Both of those things are really important because with pictures we get memories, right?
Well, so that suggests that you have warm memories that maybe you even wish you had more artifacts to remind you of.
Exactly, and befriend people. Don't be afraid to go and talk to cadets, your fellow cadets, right, your classmates, and learn from them. Because today, I graduated in 2019. I still have classmates that I talk to now, right, and I reach out to them for help. I mean, connect with people too. I'll tell you, I'm giving a presentation August 26th to a group of bank leaders. I'm going to be partnered with Codario, they're a technology company, and we're going to be talking about this exact topic: regulated firms can implement AI. Coderio's chief growth officer, he's a West Point grad, right? He graduated before me, but we've been connected because I go to the New York City West Point Association events, and we just got to talking, and he learned what I did and I learned what he did, and it just made sense for us to match together. So any newer cadet that's joining, right, and is about to go through the cycle, it's going to be terrible, but always connect with people, connect with West Pointers, connect with Service Academy grads, because when you leave that place, there's going to be so many people that will have conversations with you and will want to help you just because you happen to graduate from West Point. So that's the advice I give to any cadet that's there right now, right? Take pictures, never stop connecting with people.
Well, that's great advice. Otuoze, I'm very pleased to have had you come and share your experience, your views, your wisdom. Thanks very much for kicking off the show. And I know that you and I will be in touch as friends and colleagues going forward. So thank you very much. And I guess that's a wrap for episode 1.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to continue conversations with you, and I definitely hope to be back on the show in the future.
You bet.